Time to abandon ship.
Oh no!
Here we go!
Can I persuade you to join us for a drink? It's a tradition.
Here, here.
Jar Jar, homie, my main man, quickly. Before the Separatists attack, get into the escape pod.
Hey! This is escape, then we're the pod. Jesus!
Welcome back to Star Wars Escape Pod, and yet another episode in which we chat Star Wars for you at home. Maybe those walks with a dog, maybe you're tuning in your car. It's great to be entertaining you this week, and we have a very special guest joining us this week. His name's Jason, and we're going to be chatting to him about incredible Star Wars models and a variety of other miniature subjects, no pun intended, and we have Bryce, of course, coming back as well. So join in the chat. Let's get into it.
Another happy landing.
All right, welcome back to the show, Bryce.
Evening, gents.
Evening, and we have a very special guest joining us this week, which is Jason. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Dude,
Yeah,
it's
welcome, man.
so great to have you. I mean, I know like people are busy in the world, and thanks for just giving up some time to chat with us. I mean, it's great to have you. Yeah. We're hearing the Bad Batch theme song in the background right now. It's Force a Habit. Every for a couple of weeks on end now, we've been kind of reviewing Bad Batch almost like right off the get go. So I just hit that button, and but yeah, anyone tuning in, you'll hear a little bit about Bad Batch later on, and but first, let's chat to Jason. I mean, those of you who might be maybe recognizing Jason's name, you could have seen him on the Star Wars show a while back for his creation of the Starlight beacon. And I mean, like, Jason, do you first off, like, I mean, how did you get into Star Wars, and what made a fan out of you that you kind of maybe head down this career path or something like that? Maybe you can explain what you do. Like, just, mic is yours. Just feel free to just kind of go for it.
Try. Sure. Well, a little bit about me. Born in 1973, so I was 4 when Star Wars came out. My parents went and saw it. I have no memory of that, but I did go see it in the re-release in 78 at shout out to the Circle Theater in Annapolis, Maryland. And I vaguely remember seeing bits of it. I think I thought the stormtroopers might be robots, but I was just enthralled. And my mother, as was law at the time, took me directly to the toy store afterwards, and I got a couple action figures. And I think, if I am remembering correctly, she said you can have 4 figures and the land speeder. It's sort of a weird, foreshadowing of things to come. I was like, well, then I need Luke and Obi-Wan and the droids, because that's who goes in the land speeder. I'm rigid with the accuracy, which is kind of depressing. But it's just like, I'm not getting Vader. He wasn't on Tatooine, then anyway. And just, you're a kid in the 70s, and it's just this communal thing, and it's incredible, and it grew, and I think anyone that was a creative wanted to make Star Wars when they grew up. I had the art of books, and I had the Joe Johnson sketchbooks, and I had the making ofs, and I saw the making ofs that were broadcast on television, and I wanted to work for ILM. I wanted to blow up TIE fighters when I grew up. But I lived on the East Coast and was about 15 to 20 years too young, so that just didn't happen. And yeah, I guess at the age of 18, I could have just up and moved to California and tried to do it. But I mean, that's people have done that. I did not. So I just assumed, and then again, and to backtrack a little bit, you become like a middle schooler into high school, and that stuff sort of falls away. Star Wars was dormant for all of my high school. Actually, until like maybe the last year. I think I was a senior when the Timothy Zahn books came out, and I was like, "Oh, hey, old friend," and like we all like the nerds in my school, and this was back when nerdery was like a liability. So we were like, you tried to hide it, but you just couldn't.
Putting a different dust jacket over the Zahn books,
wearing my jacket to school with the Nostromo patch on the side kind of gave me away. They're like, nerd, and I'm like, yep. But like it felt exciting again, and I had built models as a kid. My one grandfather was into trains, like model trains, not quite like Beetlejuice, but in the attic there was a train layout. It wasn't as movie picturesque, but it was pretty darn cool. And then the other grandfather built airplane and car models, so it was in my DNA, I think. And I got model kits as a kid for gifts, like it's sort of a creative kind of present, I guess. And we built as a family. I think I say this in our Star Wars stories, but we built the Millennium Falcon as a family, and that certainly imprinted on me. But again, that all went by the wayside when I'm like, I think I like want to learn how to play guitar and see what girls are all about, and like be in a band and do fine art. And I have a fine art background, which serves me very well now. So that was all luck and happenstance, I guess. But sometime in the early mid 90s, after I'd moved out, I had my first apartment, and I started building models again. And it just coincided with, I think, the Ertl NPC, whatever, re-releases of some Star Wars kits. So I built like the Slave One and a couple X-Wings, and it was just really fun. And then this little thing called the internet happened, and I remember starting to piece together that people were comparing notes and solving like recipes, if you will, like with props and with miniatures and stuff. And I'm like, oh man, I could build a lightsaber, and like they know what they're made of. Like you were on like the alt message, the primitive RPF, and then the early RPF, and then from the RPF I made friends with people and ended up like professionally. My first job, I guess, would be for Master Replicas back in 2003, I want to say. And I just was what would you call it? Like a consultant or contractor. Like I was not a salaried employee, but I got a check every 2 weeks, and they owned me on my off hours, which is fine. But I ended up doing paint masters for them, which is you get a, like the AT-AT was the first miniature replica. Yeah, and they send you two from the factory, and you paint them both up exactly the same, and one goes back to China for referencing, and the other one like gets paraded around Toy Fair and stuff. So
this is for Master Replicas?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And then they started flying me out to the ranch, and I would go into the archives and like measure stuff and take reference photos.
Oh man.
Yeah, put Boba Fett's helmet on when no one was looking. The things you do when you're there for the first and 10th time or whatever. It was a very heady, like 3 to 5 year period. It was very exciting. Actually, no, Palisades Toys was my very first. That was in 2001 or 2. They had the license for like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the Muppets and stuff. And I was making little like toy replicas and prop replicas for that. And then, but the first Star Wars was MR. And I thought I peaked. I was like, I helped make licensed replicas. Like my dream has come true. Yeah. And then it just kept going. And then, eventually I made the Starlight beacon for Lucasfilm, which was bonkers.
That is
and
super cool.
Weirdly really easy compared to like trying to replicate an X-Wing. I have now fallen into this weird niche where I am trying to preserve the original dimensions of what they built in like 1975 and 1976. Only because I sometimes / often get access to little bits and pieces that the original ILMers kept. Like keepsakes, or I'm going to sell this one day, whatever. Found this in the closet. They're all, at the age where they're like, I guess I should clean out the storage space and see what I've, like squirreled away 20, 30, 40 years ago. So things pop up and they know what I'm working on, and they'll be like, hey, would this help? And I'm like, that kind of stuff. So it's insanely privileged bananas like situation, but they know that it's like, and I'm one of like a group of like 8 or 10 guys that have all banded together privately, fiercely, to like do the Lord's work. Like we have to preserve the X-wing because the models are literally just falling apart, and like let's do this because we can, and it's very gratifying.
Yeah.
So
wow.
Yeah, I understand that. It's almost like you're doing the job of an archaeologist in some way.
Yeah.
You have this like really old, the Holy Grail, and you're just trying to keep it, because in 1,000 years you want someone to look at the Holy Grail and be like, yeah, this is what it looked like.
Yeah.
You don't want it to change.
It's so funny because, talking to them, like, it's so different from what they did, because they're like, hey man, I just grabbed these parts because I knew they look good. Like, It wasn't quite that cavalier, but what we do, they think is bonkers. Like they like it. They're like, that's, mad respect kind of thing. But at the same time, they're like, wow, we did not care like the way you guys do. If a part fell off, you glued something else on. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know you use this. And they were like, okay, whatever. Because we've researched that.
I guess like back then though, like from the first Star Wars movie, like they weren't fans of Star Wars, like it's kind of weird to think about, but I guess it was like just their job, right?
Yeah, they liked it, but they were doing a job, and the job was build this thing this size, because this is how far the Dijkstraflex has to travel on the track, so it has to be X big or whatever to stand up to scrutiny or whatever, and it has to last until the shot's done or until the show's done. Like there was no consideration for longevity or coming up really close with a magnifying glass and a little duster and tut about things. Like it was we're time is money, fellas, that kind of thing.
I've heard some crazy stories about the Death Star model, like how it was it the Death Star model that ended up in like a trash bin or something, and someone dug it out. And
the Death Star was part of a batch of stuff that was in a storage unit, and when Lucas moved north to Marin, or within a year or two after that, they stopped payment on the storage facility, and the stuff got liquidated, like Storage Wars style, I guess.
Right.
And some college guys ended up with it or something. It ended up not getting trashed. Like some people thought it had been thrown in the dumpster. It was stored. They didn't trash it.
Okay.
But it got released into Gen Pop,
right.
And it worked its way to, I think, a country store, and was being used as like a festive trash can. I think it was even outside. It was missing the dish, so I guess that was the hole for the trash. I'm not entirely sure, but I think Gus Lopez was the one who found it and rescued it. Unless I might be misremembering the 3 college guys. They might have found it and bought it, and then Gus bought it from them. I can't remember.
The garbage can aspect sounds familiar. I think you're on the right track.
Yeah. I don't think that's apocryphal. I think it actually legitimately was a trash can.
That's so crazy, right? Yeah.
I mean,
like,
it's just a giant plexi dome. I mean, like, hey, it's got a function, I guess.
Yeah. Well, these days, I mean, like, the thing is with like models, because like I guess in film and it's just cinema in general, like models is such more of like a rare art to have on a film, and these days so many more models are just being done digitally, and those are files, so like they just get archived, and those files just kind of sit in the archives forever on like tape somewhere, whatever, once the show's over. But it's like if we can, if we want to bring it back later, it's like, all right, go and grab that tape, convert it back to digital, you've got the file again. But, actual models, like something happens to that and you don't have the original anymore. So yeah, it's pretty nuts. Star Wars is such a coveted thing now that these models that they built to last, a week are just like, well, if they're still around, that's just gold, right?
Yeah, I think it's,
go ahead.
It's like a testament to their skill and craft that the stuff is still kicking, I think.
Yeah.
Totally.
I was wondering if you've noticed like kind of an increase in interest in, in traditionally made models and stuff. I feel like we kind of went through a bit of a time where everything was 3D, and then practical effects started to make a comeback.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think everybody wants that to be the case. I don't know. Me personally, CGI bums me out the way it's usually utilized because, okay, so the best way I can explain it is what I think I was in like high school or college and I was watching my brother play Sonic the Hedgehog and I literally could not understand what I was seeing on the screen because everything was so frantic and fast. And I knew it was a side scroller, but I was just like, what the hell am I looking at? Like, ugh, because I was used to, I don't know, like I don't play video games either. So like I was used to like, shoot, what's it? Pitfall, the little guy swinging on a vine, like real simple. Like the Transformer movies, like I went and saw the first one and somebody asked what I thought. And I was like, I just feel like somebody took a bag of multicolored pieces of broken glass and shook it in front of the camera lens for 2 hours. Like I didn't know what I was looking at. It was like Alien versus Predator. Everything's so like it's all the fights happen at night so they can hide the bad CG. Yeah. And it's like all like super close quarters and quick cuts, and I'm like, it's nonsense. Like they're not making movies for my aesthetic anymore. Right, like I'm a dinosaur. I'm done. And miniatures, I think miniatures forced you to actually storyboard something and compose a shot and compose a frame. And therefore, I think that like psychologically, the people that were skilled at doing that knew what they were talking about visually, and that people who don't can kind of get a little further in the industry when you can totally change everything after the fact. Like nothing's locked down. So I think everything gets really muddy. Like the last superhero movie I saw was the Captain America one, like the first one. Like I never read comic books. I feel like a weird pariah sometimes when people are like, oh, did you watch the new whatever? Somebody was trying to force me to watch WandaVision. And I was like, look, I would need to watch like 80 hours of content to even understand what the hell they're talking about. I'm not committing, dude. Like I have no interest.
That's totally fair.
Like, I watched that Superman movie where he fought the guy from Boardwalk Empire, whatever, like who played Zod. And I turned it off like 10 minutes into like 30 minutes before it ended. Cause I'm like, it's just, I don't know. It's guys destroying entire cities and killing tens of thousands of people every time. And like, ugh, like I know he's going to win. Like who gives a shit? Sorry. So like, I'm just like, I would love for models to bring it back around, to make a comeback only if it causes people to like pause and think about how they're going to compose a shot. Right. Like that would be great. Like the movie Moon. I don't know if you've seen Moon, but it's gorgeous and it's miniature work. But I think if models are cheaper, they'll use models because that's really what it's about. Like,
it's always about the money.
None of the creatives have any say. It's all the business people making the movies. Like the creatives work under them.
Yeah.
So it's like it's sad, but
it's so true. Like as far as like the prequels and stuff, it's like if you look at a movie these days, it's basically like the producers running the show and not the director anymore. Because it's got to work into the big franchise. It's got to like be part of this larger story, right? Whereas like, back at Star Wars, he's like the first 6, like that was just George. He hired a producer. The producer does their job and starts making things run smoothly. Whereas now it's like, Marvel's run by Kevin Feige. He's a producer. He's not a director. And yet, he hires the directors and, he basically tells them kind of like the goal of what this movie's going to be about or whatever. But I don't know, it's just definitely, it's kind of weird how it's like flipped, right?
I think the first Star Wars was a total fluke in its popularity. I think George Lucas is like an incredible like documentary like filmmaker, and he shot it like that because that was the visual language and what he'd like to do. But like from all accounts, like a lot of the editing saved the structure of the film, and visually I think he lucked out because they had like no money. So like it's kind of like the stories about Aliens with James Cameron. Like if you take that camera and turn it like just slightly to the left or the right, there's no set. Like everything you see on that screen was like you like they had money to only do that, which is really incredible. And I think that like that those constraints sometimes like force you to be a little more ingenious, and that sometimes can translate into what we then decide later is brilliance.
Right.
Absolutely. It's like it,
and I'll take it. That's fine.
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. When you add those constraints, it like forces people to kind of funnel their energy into things that are important.
Yeah, be
and
creative.
They don't get they don't get bogged down in like all the different kind of possibilities. Like I've done like I hit this wall when I write for even like planning. Like if you give people like too many options, it's not gonna translate well into if you kind of give someone a couple different options, really focus on those few.
Yeah, like if I go to the store and I see there's I don't know if you guys have it in Canada, but there's a brand of mayonnaise called Duke's, and it's got that twang, I think is their tagline. It's got a little higher vinegar content in it. It's a southern mayonnaise, okay. but they have been like pumping out like habanero pepper Dukes and like tomato and bacon, and I was a sucker and bought a couple of them, and they're fine, but like. Now there's like 8 on the shelf, and I shut down emotionally. I'm like, I can't. I'm just gonna buy the regular. Like, dude, like, stop. Like, there's no way I can go through all of this in my lifetime before it expires. Like, if I want to add cucumber and dill, I'm just gonna add some cucumber and some fresh dill to my mayo. Like, everybody, knock it off. Like, Jesus. But that's me. Like, I think I'm getting curmudgeonly with that kind of stuff. But like, I get it. I totally get the human ability to shut down when faced with too many options. Like, yeah.
Oh my god. To get back to like the models and like the that versus the CG, I just want to take a step back because there was something I wanted to say about that, which is the detail, like the level of like handcrafted detail on a model that like say that you would make holds up so much longer, right? Because we're looking at these old movies in like 4K now, and they've clearly been like up-resed and everything like that, but it's crazy because like you can see details that you almost couldn't on those old I don't know, your tube tellies, and it's just like the CTR machines. I mean, like I was so happy watching like movies on a TV that was like that, but just as big as possible, and it weighs like 200 pounds. But when as soon as like flat screens became a thing, and then now the HD version comes out, the remastered, and then now we have like the 4K release, which is insane. You can just flip it on Disney Plus on a digital, and like you can see every single like little pore on someone's face. And like things like makeup and like actual models and stuff, they just hold up so well. And when those CG kind of elements, especially back in the day with the prequels, which were really groundbreaking for their time and pushed the industry forward, but realistically, like they weren't necessarily made to hold up, because that was the cap. Like that was the absolute limit as to what they could do. Whereas a model, it's like, the more detail you physically put on that thing, the better it's just going to hold up for eternity, right?
I if you ever chat with Richard Edlund, ask him about Battlestar Galactica's theatrical release. He was just like, we shot that thing, and they did a lot of that like Battlestar TV movie, which turned into like the first couple episodes of the show or whatever. They did that right after Star Wars Before Empire. Little trivia note, they were operating under the name MCA 57, not ILM for that project. But they shot it all for television, like, which back then was what, 640 by 480 or something horrific. Like he was like really despondent that they were going to project it on a movie screen, because he's like, we didn't compose for that. Oh my God, what are you doing to me? And then another quick anecdote. Last year at this model convention, Wonderfest, I was talking to a fella who turns out to be one of the makeup guys for Saturday Night Live. And I thought it was interesting that they're assigned a cast member. So like he gets, like Mikey Day, for example, like that's his guy for the season or whatever. So everybody's got their own makeup guy. And of course, like I'm not asking any of the normal questions. I never tend to do that, like weirdly, like I was like, oh, I love SNL. And I started asking about the process, and they like ask an artist about like their process and they perk up and you get good info. And he went off on like the challenges of HD because he's like, you want to try to hide a wig line in 30 seconds at a commercial break, knowing everyone's gonna see it? He's like, nightmare. And he'd been there for like 30 years, so he's seen the transition. He's just like, I guess eventually they're just gonna beam these people into homes, and then like, well, then what am I gonna do? He's like, hell, like he was like, it's so challenging with the resolution. So yeah, I can see how like. Yeah,
like now 8K TVs are becoming a thing. It's like, when does it end?
I'm so grateful that I'm probably too old now to like visually appreciate super high def or super high res audio, because my ears are shot and my eyes are going, because I'm old. So I'm like, this, I think I've got 4K. I don't even know if my TV's 4K, to be honest.
Would it make a difference? Like that's
no, I don't think it would. I'm like, I'm fine. Like when I watch Star Wars, I watch it maybe once or twice a year, and it's my Plex file that's like, I don't know, it's some, like, I don't watch the digital versions. I watch the original, because I'm a big nerd. I'm a big ILM like fan, so I'm like, I want to see all the matte lines, and I want to see the nitty gritty, what I saw as a kid, that kind of thing.
Right.
Which we all do, but I guess that's never happening again. So we get what we get.
Something that Josh was talking about with the kind of piqued my interest, where it was really fun to watch when something gets blown up. I was watching it back, and the first time you see, that the first shot of like the ATSTs in the back, and they're they're the old McCory AT, the ones that are used in Return of the Jedi. It's like that kind of stuff is really cool because you see that for one shot, and it's and like I just remember like pausing that and like going over all the detail just on that one like little shot as it walked by. The Empire Chicken Walker. I've got a couple quick anecdotes about that thing. That's my favorite one. I love it. I love that.
The Jedi one is fine. My friend Bill made that one, so I can't disparage anything about it, but the Empire one is sexy to me. It's got the longer legs, and it's mysterious, and it's weird, and the model's been trashed, so you can't like reference photos are very lean on the ground, so it's really hard to find.
That's what I was going to ask about too, because you also have the Return of the Jedi fleet ship as well, and I'm like, how hard is it to like find some like stuff that's just used when one or two shots in the background? Like, how do you go about finding schematics and designs and bits for that?
Well, okay, so I'll answer both. The ATST, you knew Joe Johnson had built it as just a static model on a lark, like just for fun, and it was sitting on the table. I'm guessing this was like 78, early, like, or maybe, it must have been 78. And George Lucas walked by and pointed at it and was like, I like that, let's use that. And he was like, crap. And so they had to break it apart and reconstruct it on an armature that Tom Cinnamon made. And I've talked to Tom about like the armature, and he's like, it was kind of hard to work. Like, I didn't engineer it the way it needed to be. And Phil hated animating it because the parts would pop off. Which, another quick anecdote, when Bill made the Jedi one, Phil said, make everything one piece and then it bolts on. So like those two leg sections are like assemblies that literally like screw into the aluminum. And the Empire one, I mean, today it's mostly just the armature. All the plastic has long ago just sort of fallen off over the years. And it was going to have a bigger presence in the movie. There is a storyboard, I think. I think Dennis Muren was animating it, or maybe Phil was animating it and Dennis was working the camera. I don't know. But it was supposed to sort of walk and then track a snowspeeder with its head and shoot it. And the shot was ruined because I think the camera was bumped, and they just scrapped it. So like those kinds of little anecdotes that you hear over the years from those guys or in print or whatever just fuels that like mystique and fire. And fleet ships are totally the same. Like all those fleet ships in Empire, like you see that in the movie and you're like, what are they? I have to know, I'll die. You know, and they show up in Jedi and they're different. And the ones in Empire, it turns out a lot of them were little like 1-inch photographs that they cut out and put on a piece of glass. So good luck, kids, like trying to figure that out. And like I think probably some of them were just thrown away. There's like maybe 6 or 7 in the archives. They look awful, just awful up close because they were never meant to be seen. Most of them are monochromatic, just bombed gray, and they're kit bashed. And like the last time I was there, I think was like February 2019. I was looking at them, and Lauren Peterson was there, and he just like looks over and he's just like, yeah, those. And he's just like, I don't get it. I'm like, because we don't know what they are. And he was just like, whatever, who cares? Like, you know, look at this. This is cooler. Which he has a point. But, you know, when you've been obsessing over this stuff for your entire life, it's like, oh, a new ship out of my favorite movie? I don't care how ugly it is. I must know. Yeah. So, yeah, fleet ships have a soft spot in my heart. And they do with all the other guys building models because they, you know, like it's, I feel like so we call them, the shorthand for these things are studio scale. And all that means is trying to build a model exactly like the original one for the studio or for the shot. So the scale is malleable. You're just trying to replicate what they did using the parts they did and the size they did. And it gets real competitive, and I've noticed, and secretive, and I've noticed there's like a lot of new blood, which is great. And kind of like bizarre because it's like the stuff we've been doing, like we're all jaded, like my friends and I, because we've been doing this for so long. And you see the new guy come in, he's like, I'm going to make probe droid pods. And we're like, okay, like, oh my God, another one of those. But it's like, that's the entry to the, you know, like that's the one you cut your teeth on. That's your first car, you know, like that's a pretty friendly, easy build and very satisfying. So like, can't get super excited when I see them again and again and again, but I can totally appreciate, because I remember when a couple of guys figured out what all the parts were, and that was cool because the probe droid pods were a mystery for up until I'd say mid 2000s, maybe 2011. Cool. Yeah, because like nobody cared. Like anybody who had ever gone into the archives to take pictures of them, sometimes people will take pictures surreptitiously, and this was back when like everybody had an iPhone 4 or 3 and there was like no good low light camera, so like you'd get these pictures from them, you know, like they would smuggle them out, like I could get fired if you post this online. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, I can't tell what's going on. It's like super low res, and it's like it's all muddy. But eventually pictures like bubbled to the surface, and we were like, oh, it's that. And then talking to Pat McClung years later, he worked on Empire, and he's just like, I built those dumb things in like a day. He was like, he was like, that was late in production. He was like, that's not like 5 tanks that were slapped together to make like a thing, the pod. It's just like, you're building, why are you building that? And I'm like, because no one did. No one knows
the casualness of it is astounding. Oh yeah, you know, I love it. Get like, because I love it. You just have like a room full of super motivated and talented people, and they're just hanging out like building whatever, like the ATS, the walker, right? He's just doing that kind of like not expecting it to get grabbed. Like it's
never in a million years.
Yeah, it's a miracle that this movie, you know, ended up being made with any sort of like things could have just not looked correct. Like now you have art directors and like 3 people under them to make sure you're like on style, and everyone, you know, there's so many layers to the models, and you're not just making anything. Like if you're, everything's just so planned. So,
well, and like, I can't remember if it was Andor or Obi-Wan, but the probe droid pod got some love recently in one of the shows.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it was Obi-Wan, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it showed like the pod being launched or like processed inside and then shot out. I was like, that literally, I think, is only because of like the guys in our scene pushing that stuff to the forefront. Like, I don't think that whoever worked on that show, like, it's very like it's a tight knit community. We all kind of know each other. I know people that work on the show. They know who I am. You know, like we're all very friendly. And I'm sure somebody was like, we could show the pod. We know what it looks like now. You know, I was like, yeah, sure. You know, like I would not be surprised because when I saw it, I was just like so excited. And then I just started chuckling. My wife finds it endlessly amusing. She's like, oh, that's that little dumb thing you made. I'm like, right, look. I think I had to rewind it and look at it again. You know, it was like, oh, they got it right. Look at that.
So what is it that draws you to like the machines of like sci-fi? Because like I really love your Blade Runner blimp as well. Like and all that kind of stuff has such a cool aesthetic. But where does that like
it's funny. I'm building a couple Skyhopper models right now, and they're very clean. And it's just like it's so challenging for me. Like I've always said that the guys that build car models are like I admire them so much because they like have these perfect flawless finishes and they like, you know, buff their paint to look like it looks like a car. You know, like, oh my god, it's gorgeous. And then I am building this X-Wing and I'm like, oh yeah, it's all dented and dirty and it's got scoring on it. You know, it's like I find immense pleasure in building something that looks like it's functional and also really not taken care of. Like
that lines up perfectly with Star Wars though, right?
Right. Yeah. I think it's an excellent fit for what I like to do.
Yeah.
Like the model show that I go to, Wonderfest, is coming up in June, and we're doing the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi celebration. And Charlie Bailey and Lauren Peterson and Bill George will be there, and it'll be a rip-roaring time. But we're setting up a little display of stuff, and everybody's like wanting to make a Jedi-themed model. And so I decided I'm going to make a Bomar monk, mostly because I have an STL 3D file of my actual brain from an MRI scan that I had done in a previous job. Yeah, the guy was one of the scientists. We have an MRI downstairs. My old job, there was an MRI downstairs. The guy came up and he's like, "You're the 3D guy," and I was like, "I am." He goes, "Could you print a human brain if I gave you an STL?" And I was like, "Yeah, it's watertight." And he's like, "It's watertight," which just means you can print it. Yeah. And I was like, "Yeah, where'd you get it?" And he goes, "Oh, it's my brain. Like we're testing. Like I figured out how to make them watertight." And I was like, "Go on." And so he told me, you know, what he was doing, and I was like, "That's cool." And he's like, "What? You know, does it cost anything?" I was like, "No, but I can print it in clear resin at my house and not charge you anything if you can get my brain scanned." And he smiled. And he's just like, "Okay, well, maybe the machine needs to be calibrated soon." And I was like, "All right, we have an accord." So he sent me the file, and I printed it at home on my dime, and he was over the moon. And then I get this call like a week or two later, and he's just like, "What are you doing at 11 a.m.?" And I was like, "Going to lunch." And he's just like, "Don't." And I was like, "Okay." And he goes, "We have to calibrate the MRI. Do you know anybody?" And I was like, "Whoop, whoop, 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 whoop." You know, they ran downstairs. They stuck me in the machine. And a couple of days later, I had my brain file, and I was like, "Hooray!" And he was just like, he's like, "Look, you have very squiggly things. It's very nice. You're probably smart." And I'm like, "Oh, thank you, complimented." Showed my mother that it wasn't just an empty void, you know, like kind of thing. But literally, the only reason I'm making a Bomar monk is because A, it's Jedi, and B, my brain will be in there.
That is super cool. It's a nice touch.
Yeah. And I love the one that my friends made for at Tippett Studio made for the Book of Boba Fett. I think that's a cool riff on it. Mine's very similar, a little different, only because like I just want to have fun with it. And it's obnoxiously large. I'm making it too big. I'm such an idiot. Like I always like, how big can I make the body and have it fit on the print bed? I use a Form 3 Plus, like a Formlabs printer. And so it's not huge, but big enough that like I can be dangerous if I'm not careful. So like this thing's going to be like, I don't know, quarter scale, maybe. I haven't quite figured it out, but it's too big. I'm too far along to like scrap it and start over.
Is Are there any rules with your partner on size limits for your models around the house?
No. My wife thinks it's fun.
That's awesome.
And nothing sticks around too long either. So she knows that, like, even the big stuff kind of goes away. I have, and everything's mostly sitting in the back TV room. I do have the Ralph McQuarrie concept probe droid in the dining room, only because it looks really good against this like butternut squash colored wall that we have. So I was like,
yeah, I have that. I have the painting. I have a print. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. And I made that thing like too big accidentally. Also, I really need to like sit there and think about it next time I start a project, because you get about halfway done with the prints and you've spent like $300 on material and you're like, well, no going back now, like twice as big as I probably should have made this stupid thing. But I painted that thing in like a copper color just because I thought the painting has a lot of brown hues and it would be neat, and it was. So that's kind of fun.
You mentioned the 3D printing aspect, because that kind of flows in with a question from a friend of ours, Phil. He really wanted me to ask you this, which is, what is your favorite stomping ground for finding pieces that you can integrate into your models? And 3D printing has really changed the game in the sense that you can just kind of like whip up a model and print it out yourself in whatever shape and style you kind of want, right? So like, is there a lot of going out, digging in, recycling centers and like whatever, just try and find things still? Or is it, if you need something, are you kind of at the point where you just printed it yourself?
Everything I build is almost always like a replica of something. And if it's not, like the Starlight beacon, I'm going to go to that same pool generally of model kits, or the same spirit of, just because the design language is so well established and I'm very comfortable, working with that. So like, I'm going to grab a bunch of 1/700th scale, like Tamiya ship models, because I know those little parts, you're going to see them and subconsciously be like, yeah, that looks familiar. That sells it. And the rest of it is like styrene plating and like a laser cut acrylic for like armatures, or metal if it needs to be, stronger. The 3D printing for me, so my hands are really bad. I got the genetic and I guess lifestyle lottery of my hands turn into crap, like over the past like 6-7 years. I've had 5 hand surgeries. In fact, one of them, I'm going to the ortho tomorrow morning to figure out why it hurts still.
Oh man.
But yeah, I've used them up. Like, short story, my hands are all messed up. Nerve damage and just like tendonitis and trigger finger and trigger thumb and carpal tunnel, you name it. It sucks. And like, I can't sand for more than an hour anymore, but like, I think I did this to myself, sanding for 8 hours a day for 15 years. Like, duh. Like, the human body should not have done what you did. So, like, oh, you idiot. So, I got really scared in, like, 2017 and was like, I gotta learn a 3D because I might not be able to physically make models anymore. Like, this was really creepy, scary. And luckily, what happened was I learned it. I still feel like I'm learning it. People are like, you're really good. And I'm like, I'm not, man. Like, I'm all right. Like, I get by. I feel like a pretender with a lot of this stuff. But it's now this incredible tool that lets me do a lot of like under painting, for lack of a better word, stuff that I can then build off of. So like, I don't have a lathe, I don't have a mill, but I can 3D print like a pie shape and put it together, and now I've got a saucer, and now I can slap a bunch of stuff on it, and don't have to, like, you still have to do some sanding, but I have a really nice, stupid, expensive printer. It's like buying an Apple or buying a Mac and not like a HP. Like, I'm overpaying for my resin, but I never get a bad print.
Right.
So like, there's a lot of guys that are like, why don't you use the Chinese one? And I'm like, because I need to make this thing work and not fiddle around with like, settings.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just going to spend the $4,000 and buy that printer and like, be done.
No, I totally get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, because I can sell something, like that first printer that I bought, the first thing I made with it sold and paid for the printer. So like within 6 months I was, like net zero or whatever. So like, all right, we're good.
Well, then it's worth
like,
it. Yeah.
Ironically, it's made me faster. because now I've got this little robot buddy doing stuff day and night, and I like I did the thing that a lot of people do where you go online and you find a print, you like, oh, I don't have to like build it now. If it's free, it's crap. Like in my experience, like I don't buy prints online. I don't use free prints. I design everything myself except like organic stuff. I have a couple really talented 3D guys that do like faces and stuff. So I pay them to like do like pilot heads or, like that kind of stuff. And I feel like I'm supporting my fellow artists, and now I've got, like an incredible looking, red leader, the stick in my X-Wing. Like, this is great. Yeah. He even picked up on it, and I didn't even do this. I noticed this. The helmet's a little crooked in the film, so the helmet's crooked on the guy's head, and I'm like, like chef's kiss. That's amazing. Like, holy crap. Red 10's like that too. Red 10's, I think, even more crooked. Wow. But he just did a Porkins for me, and I'm like, oh, that was more expensive because we had to do the whole body. I was like, cool. And I commissioned Lauren's head and Bill's head, and I made little X-Wing guys for them, just for fun. This was back when I did have the 9 to 5 and I could throw money at goofy stuff. That's kind of probably done now. Yeah. but I was just like, wee! It's really, really weird because sky's the limit, right? Yeah. I mean, you can make it. If you can draw it, you can make it.
Yeah, it's kind of like crazy. Like, as a kid, do you ever think it would become something like this? And you're
no, even as an adult, like
you'd be working with a robot helper, and you're
right. No, it's terrifying. Yeah, I'm really glad. I'm glad the internet didn't exist when I was a teenager. That there's no record of me in adolescence that way. Like, that seems awful. And I'm really glad that I'll probably be dead before AI takes over. But I don't know. AI has been doing some weird stuff the last couple of weeks, apparently. So it tried to get some guy to cheat on his wife, and it also like something threatened violence or something. So I'm like, oh man, it's already starting. Like, this is way faster than I thought. Oh my gosh. So like, I'm hopefully in a sweet spot in my lifespan. Sure, sorry, my hand hit my Apple Watch.
More robots.
I heard you.
Yeah, speaking of, holy crap. So hopefully we're in a sweet spot, like biologically, where we'll be dead before like things get really creepy. But it's already like science fiction through and through to me that you can do this in your home.
Yeah.
Like, what? Yeah, I'm making an ion cannon. It's a slow burn because a friend is helping me with all the fancy electronic, like the mechanicals.
Right.
I did a pattern of the ion cannon because I had good reference, and I went and visited it personally, which was nice.
Yeah.
That one's difficult because it's covered in like a weird, like the paint has reacted and desiccated over the years with this stuff they put on it. And it's like made everything look fuzzy, so you can't see the kit parts, which it just keeps it mysterious and drives me crazy. But it was out in the Bay Area and had coffee with Ease, and he's the guy, doesn't work for ILM anymore, but he's the guy that built the ion cannon. He machined barrel, which is like a 2-part thing. He machined it out of acrylic. So I meet him. Very nice that he met me. He didn't know who I was, but via a couple of the other guys, they're like, yeah, he's cool. Like, neutral location. We met at a coffee house, public. My ether soaked rag. I had to keep it in my pocket. I showed him we were talking about stuff, and he's graciously answering a couple dumb questions, and I showed him the part, because I'm like, I'm a fan of the craft, and I made this. And, you probably recognize it. He's like, oh, wow, yeah, I machined that out of acrylic. And he's just like, how did you make that? And I said, oh, I 3D printed it. And he's just like, wow, that's great. What, where'd you go? And I was like, I did it in my basement. And he stopped. And he's like, wait, what? And I told him, I was like, yeah, it's a Form 2. At the time, it was a Form 2 printer. And he's like, explain this to me, because he's a 3D design professor now, and he didn't know that the technology with SLA resin printing had gotten that far that fast. And he was just like, "Are you kidding?"
When was this?
Like early 2019. Like, it had been around, but it wasn't like the FDM stuff. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And the form printers are nice. So basically, what I was showing him only 3 or 4 years ago, you would probably have to have spent 40 grand for a Stratasys like objet or something.
Yeah.
Stratus, I think. I don't know. But like the entry fee like had dropped finally, which was great because I don't the printers that use the spools like I look at them as hand killers because you have to do so much sanding. I'm like, ugh,
Yeah.
you know, like no,
I have one myself.
It's
Yeah.
it's for most people. I feel like it's a novelty. Like it's like you buy it, you print like 9 or 10 Grogu's like dressed like the Necronomic, you know, dressed like Freddy Krueger or what, you know. There's like these guys like just obsessively print these things, and I'm like, that's your hobby.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
you like that, and that's fine. Like I need to like make tools that I then can use build off of.
Yeah.
And that most of the time like won't work for me. It does sometimes. But I'm just so locked in now with the resin one that I can't go back.
Well, and if you're relying on you know the smoothness of the object, you know, and you know, like you say, if your hands are totally shot, there's no way, you know, sanding PLA sucks. Like there's no
fun. And
fun
PLA is like plant-based, and no one can tell you how long it's going to last. Like it's a general concern sometimes. Like a friend of mine printed some stuff with using the resin printer, but he used this Chinese resin, and he said a year later it was crumbling to dust. And he's like, "Do you worry?" And I said, "Well, you know, that was $20 a liter, and my resin's 150. So I'd like to think that buys me a little more time." Yeah. And I had talked to the guys at Forum Labs, and they're like, "We think if you use the resin correctly, which you're doing, and you seal it for more UV exposure, which you're doing because you're painting the entire thing, we're thinking 30 to 40 years." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'll be dead. That's fine." I don't need it to last 100 years. I just need it to last until everyone dies. Yeah. Like, I mean, you know,
I don't have to see my babies crumble.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like, and if somebody like buys something from you, you don't want to be like, "Haha, sucker! It's gonna detonate in 2 years." Yeah. But things that I printed 3 or 4 years ago are still going strong, and no one's complained. Nothing's drooped. Nothing's cracked, so it's a relief. But I also engineer them like thinking I don't want any load-bearing resin.
Yeah.
So
I gotta ask because you know this High Republic Starlight beacon model that you've done is you know, it's like, I mean, to a lot of Star Wars fans, that's kind of like the staple thing that they know you for. So like, how did you get that gig? I mean, I assume maybe the master replica kind of led into it, but like, how did you get that gig? And then like, what was it like to work with, you know, maybe Story Group, or, you know, maybe some of the concept designers behind Starlight Beacon, like Doug Chang? I don't know if he was involved, but yeah, just maybe
so yeah, on February 29th, 2020, like literally 2 weeks before everyone went home for 2 years, our Star Wars Stories crew descended upon us, and it was 10 people in my home for 8 hours to get 6 minutes of usable footage. No, I mean, it was, but like, I know that it just takes a while. But the really cool people, you know, Jordan is fantastic. He was the host. There were a couple producers, the StarWars.com editor, a couple of people from Story Group, and, you know, everybody's friendly, and we all kind of know the same people, you know, like, I'm like, "Do you remember Chris from licensing? He was my MR contact." It's like, "Oh yeah, he's moved to international now." I'm like, "Good for him. He's still there." You know, like that kind of crap. Yeah. And it just was a positive, fun experience. You know, and Jordan's like, "Everybody loved your episode. It's really great. Everybody loves models." And I'm like, models are sexy. I mean, like, yeah, you know, everybody loves a model kit. It was really funny. Like, when I was being vetted, they were like, "Do you sell garage kits?" And I was like, "No." I explain it as, I mean, I sell things, I don't want to lie, but like, imagine you're an artist and you make one-offs, and sometimes your one-offs are just like the other one-off, but you make them one at a time, and somebody comes by and they want to buy it, and you're like, "Cool." I don't have ads in Starlog magazine. I don't have a cart on my website, and they're like, "Cool, we're cool with that. We just don't want you making kits and, you know, garage stuff." And I'm like, "That's fair." And I thought that was very generous of Disney, Lucasfilm, whatever, to take that stance with fans. But they understand that, like, you know, fans are the lifeblood of the thing or whatever. So yeah. I think that's very nice of them. Yeah, so like that show happens, and then like we all go into lockdown, and wow. And then a year later, I get contacted by the Star Wars.com people, and they're like, "You're part of the family. We're doing this initiative, and want to know if you want to make a unique model for it." And I was like, "Please and thank you." Yeah. And I will say it didn't pay very well, but they know that you aren't going to say no, so you know, whatever. Like one guy was very, very like, he was like, "Thank you for doing this. I know you could probably make way more money building something for a doctor." And I was like, "Yeah, but you're fulfilling the, you know, bucket list dream that I never thought would happen, so it's fine." You know, like I fantasized about getting a drawing or two from Ralph McQuarrie or Joe Johnson come across my desk and like, "All right, kid, show me what you got," you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And because we were in lockdown, it was all Zoom based, so I might as well have been out in California for it, which was kind of great. Nobody was going into an office, so it was all kind of equal footing. But yeah, so like I got 3 pieces of art. They were just layered Photoshop files. They were paintings of the Starlight Beacon you probably have seen like in, you know, like books or whatever. And it was the, you know, all the little Zoom heads. It was Pablo Hidalgo.
Yeah.
He and Phil were my main contacts. And there were, you know, a couple people from the website, a couple people from the story group, a couple people from, I guess, licensing or whatever. You know, it was just a whole bunch of people. And we met more often in the beginning. And, you know, like I had questions and, you know, they had questions for me, like, "How are you going to do this? How," you know, I was like, "How big does this need to be? What do you need it to do?" And they're basically like, "We wanted, you know, this tall, and it's set dressing for the set, but we want it really nice." And I, of course, am like, "I'm going to build this as nice as I can with the time I have," thinking this is, you know, a model that gets snuck into the Presidio under cover of darkness that I made, you know, like I'm not saying that Jon Favreau is going to walk by and go like, "Hey, that looks cool, put that in Mando," but you know, like if it lights up, maybe I got a better chance, you know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, totally.
And then they blow it up like at the end of the first wave or whatever. I was like, "Damn it." Like the guy, as a quick aside, the guy contacted me. He's like, "We're blowing it up. I'm so sorry." And I'm like, "They blew up the Death Star. It's fine. You know, like whatever."
You're like, "That's why I got into this, to get TIE fighters blown up."
Yeah, good things get blowed up all the time.
Yeah.
So
it's very cool. You even have some ships in the hangar base. Too.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So like we were talking about things, and I'm like, "All right, these little weird ovoid pods on the bottom, what are those?" And you could see, some of the stuff was made up, I think, on the spot. Pablo was like, "Fuel pod." I'm like, "Okay." You know, like there was a lot of like back and forth where I'm like, "Can I put lights here?" Sure. Why not? You know, what is it? I don't know. And I'm like, "Okay, this is a cooling fin." Okay. You know, it was a lot of that, which is great because that's how it, you know, like that's how it happens, honestly.
Yeah.
And like I think I've also said this a bunch of times before. Like I've got these like little anecdotes that are like barfed again and again. But as a kid, there was a little Christmas ornament that had a little hole in the side. You look in, and there was like a little rabbit eating a carrot or something. And I was so fascinated with it, like Fabergé egg. So I always love to, if there's a hole in a model I make, you're rewarded for looking in.
Yeah.
Like there's got to be something in there. And they were like, "There's a hangar bay in the midsection in the equator." And I was like, "Ha ha ha, yay, what are we putting in there?" And they're like, "We don't know." And I was like, "Excellent." And I was like, "Okay, what's the aesthetic of this hangar bay, because it's a billion years before whatever." And they were like, "Yeah, make it look kind of like this episode of this show from the I can't even remember what they said, but I was like, "Okay, it's kind of browns and golds. Okay, great." And then I said, "Okay, there's the ship that like the little Jedi younglings make lightsabers on. I forget what the ship's called, but like it's cool. It's got like, looks kind of Corellian, and it fits your timeline. Can I put that in there to give you the sense of scale?" They were like, "Yeah, okay." So I contacted the guy that made it for the show, and I was like, "Hey, I'm working legit. do you have any reference? And he sent me the file, and I was like, well, that was easy. And so I just scaled it down really far and printed it, and it was like, printed at like 2 inches or whatever. But then there's a back hanger bay, and I said, space considerations, I'm gonna force perspective this thing. I'm gonna really truncate it, but when you look in, it's gonna look like it extends further. They're like, great, whatever. I said, I'm gonna put a ship back there. They're like, what ship? And I said, okay. John Barry, I think it was John Barry, drew the ship that they call the Dowager Queen, and it's what crashed on Tatooine.
Right.
It's been retconned into something else for the special edition, but initially it's that saucer shape with the thing, and it was just put up to hide, I think, TV antennas or something, or trees on the set. Like it's hiding real life stuff.
Right.
Which is the only reason it exists. But I said, apparently it crashed on Tatooine a long time ago when it was a colony ship. So maybe it had hung out there, or a ship like it. And they were like, great, put it in. So a friend of mine had done like a fun little, pretty decent, but still simple, because the shapes are simple, model. And he generously, graciously loaned that file to me. And I skewed it to the same perspective. So if you look at the print, it's really weird looking. But if you look at it head on in the little hangar bay, which is the only way you can look in, it works. Mm-hmm. So those Easter eggs were super fun and cool. And I have to say that like maybe a third of the way into the whole process, they were like, we don't have to meet with you as much as we have been. You clearly have the design language going. Just touch base and make sure you're not going crazy off script. And I was like, that's like the greatest compliment, man.
Yeah.
Like that's so cool. And yeah, it went so fast because there was nothing to reference. And I'm like putting parts down and I get in a zone. I kind of liken it to automatic writing almost, where you're like working and you just start laying stuff down and you're comfortable with aesthetic and you just start like building off of stuff, and they liked what I did. So, but like I've said, I was talking to Bill George about it one time, and I was like, it was really easy. Like I thought it would be harder than making a replica something, but like you just make the thing and then you're done. He's like, yeah. Like he's like, if you know what you're doing, yeah. He's like,
I was gonna say, it would probably give you an idea of what it'd be like to work.
It was such it was such like a little kid winning the lottery kind of thing feeling. It was really cool.
Yeah, because you really got to recreate that experience too of like, someone on Star Wars that would have had like a concept art to do, right?
Yeah, I feel like as close as I'm ever gonna get. And I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever do anything like that again for them. Like the door's open, of course. But I'm like, thank you for throwing me that bone. Holy cow. I printed a couple Christmas ornaments for them in December, or November, I think, actually. And they were over the moon about that. And I'm like, yeah, man, little Starlight beacons.
Yeah. I saw them in the background of the Star Wars show at one point. I was like, I wonder.
I whipped up a bunch of those. Like, what was that? Right before a surgery? I think it was right before a hand surgery. Yeah. Because I'm like, I can get them done, but I need to fast track this because I'm going to be out of commission for a month.
I really hope that this model that you make, because it looks amazing. Like I hope it ends up like what you say. Someone walks by and let's just throw it in a show or something like that. It's like assuming that it can fit within the timeline of when this show takes place or whatever. But I mean, like there's still a lot of potential there, right?
Yeah, somebody said there's some show called Acolyte that it might fit in, like time wise.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I mean, if nothing ever happens with it, I'm fine.
Yeah,
it was awesome to do.
As long as someone doesn't turn into some sort of garbage can in 100 years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they paid me and it got shipped out, so they can do what they want. I would hope not, but
Yeah.
That's a beautiful model. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, I love the lights on the inside too. That's such a nice touch. Like,
I went crazy with the lights.
My favorite part about it, it's like getting to look at the underside of it and getting to see these like almost like 4 worm-like engines that are very McCory-esque and very Dune kind of. I love that.
Yeah, they were like the top has to be white for the light side of the Force, and the bottom has to be dark for the dark side.
Oh,
I'm like,
they said that, or
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
I said, well, I can't go white because it'll look like a toy, so it'll be white-ish, and I'm gonna break it up with like panels and stuff just so the light catches something.
Yeah.
And the bottom, I'll go dark gray, but if you go black, you're not gonna see anything. And they were like, oh yeah, okay. So that it all worked. I mean, I think it reads fine.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I was terrified that they were going to be like, no, stark white and stark black, and I'll be like, it's going to look like a Kenner toy, man.
That's great. I mean, like that's contributing to like lore at that point, right? Because like not only are you making like an actual like detailed model of which like they could even reference later if they have to make a CG version of it or something. They're probably gonna take super high resolution photographs of what they got that you made and go off of that or something, right?
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
They it was pretty nuts.
Yeah.
Like and at one point they called and were like, how big is it? I was like, I don't know, you wanted it X amount, and they were like, no, like in real life. I was like, what? They're like, we're trying to figure out its scale, like how big is it in meters tall, like what scale is it? And I was like, huh, okay. So I looked at the ships that were in the docking bay as a reference and calculated the scale and said, okay, I think it's this. And I think I even did like a Star Destroyer next to it, like it's this big. And they were like, okay, cool. That's canon. Congratulations. And I was like, wait, what? I was like,
Wow.
cool.
That's awesome.
So cool.
That.
Yeah.
Because I laughed and I was like, you guys don't ever care about scale. Like, people are still fighting about how big the AT-ATs are.
Yeah, people are still
like, no.
trying to figure out how big the TIE fighters are.
Oh my God, right?
Yeah.
When somebody asked me what scale that is, I'm like, I don't care. Like, I'm sorry. Like, that is a tastes great, less filling, or kind of like argument that's never going to get solved.
Oh man. Well, I mean, it's been just over an hour now. I don't want to take up your whole evening. It's been super awesome to chat with you, Jason. What are
I feel like I've said nothing. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, maybe before you go, like what are the things that you're kind of looking forward to now? Like, what are the projects that you're kind of excited to get into, or something you maybe have on the go?
Yep.
Right now, I'm finishing up some Skyhoppers. I'm working on a couple of Death Star turrets. Again, it's this weird thing where, like, there were 4 Death Star turrets made. There was 1 made for A New Hope, and then 3 in 3 different sizes made for Jedi. And I had restored an A New Hope one. And when they send something to me to fix up, I'm like, you're cool if I reference the hell out of this and, like, repattern it. They're like, yeah, go nuts. So I did that and made, like, a little, like, casting set, for buddies of the New Hope Tower. And then the smallest Death Star tower, a screen use one was sent to me, also to restore. And that one was broken enough that we just cast it because he wanted copies to give to friends. And so I kept a couple. So I've got the smallest one. But I knew there were 2 more, like a medium and a large. And I was just offhand talking about them, and he's like, "Oh, I think my buddy has those still." And they show up in the mail, and I just get to borrow them so I can repattern them. So I did, and like when you have something sitting in front of you, it's a lot easier than photographs. Let me tell you. So I made those, repatterned those, and I'm making we molded and cast them. And everybody going to Wonderfest, can get a copy of one or the other or both. And we're going to line them all up on a table and have like this big group display of turrets, Death Star towers.
Oh, that's cool.
As a fun thing. So working on those, I got to weather them. They're almost done. And then I'm working on yet another X-Wing. Like a little more data has come to light, and I can make it just that much better. So I'm like, yeah, you know what? I'm gonna make another X-Wing, and then short/long term repattern of the TIE Fighter from parts from the studio mold that were pulled for posterity. Aren't really suitable for building, but I had them really nicely high-res 3D scanned by a local company, so those get done. And then I restored what turned out to be half of the original wooden Y-Wing pattern from late 75, early 76. So while that was in my possession, we of course measured all that. So I can nail the Y-wing now. I'm pretty sure. Like, and by me, I mean all of my friends who have ID'd all the kit parts and, the little takes a village kind of thing. So those are going to be fun. Those are going to be very fun.
Just out of curiosity, have you played the X-Wing miniatures game? Like the
No.
FFG one? You know which one I'm talking about?
Yeah, I do. My friend tries to rope me into playing stuff. I also don't really play tabletop games. I played something called Gaslands one time with a friend. It was like a Mad Max turn-based game.
Okay.
That's only because I wanted to make a Mad Max car. It was kind of fun just to do. But the X-Wing game sounds neat.
Yeah, like the models. I think I've purchased one or two myself just purely for the model.
I've got a couple.
They're yeah, okay, so you do have some, right?
Yeah, I've got the Rebel Transport and the Blockade Runner.
Yeah,
and
yeah. They're wicked, right?
They're a nice size.
Yeah, for game pieces, like they're incredibly
Nice.
detailed. Yeah, they're super nice. Yeah. So anyone who wants to get their hands on like miniaturized Star Wars ships, maybe look into X-Wing.
Yeah. I mean, every time I would go into a Barnes and Noble on the end cap, I would sort of paw through them all like, oh, and they were doing like lots of like weird stuff, like the Moldy Crow, or like like they were sort of going into the niches, which I like the fleet ships. I'm like, man, I live for that.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Awesome. Well, go for it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then ultimately, once my wife and I are wanting to move to Maine as soon as we find a suitable house, I have most of what I need to build a 5-foot Falcon, which is decades of accruing parts and whatever. But if I built it in my house, it would be like building a boat in the basement. There would be no way to get it out. So it's always been, like when I one day have a shop that doesn't require something coming out of a 28-inch door from 1925.
That would be pretty sweet. That would be an awesome thing to have. Like, have you seen that table that you can buy from? I forget the company name, but I think it's like they make those little Mandalorian like skull crests, and they did a few.
Regal Robot.
Regal, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, Regal Robot. Yeah, they have this insane desk with the Millennium Falcon kind of built into this desk, and like. I don't know. Would you do something like that? Like make a Falcon and put in a coffee table or something?
No, yeah. So like a 5-foot Falcon is such a space commitment. I think I have a couple friends that have built them. Lee in Florida has his vertical against the wall, which I think is probably the most reasonable thing for most people if they're going to build something that big. Yeah. But my friend Sean out in Colorado, like has it on full display, like just dominating a corner of the room. Again, my house was built in 25, so like I can't get a bed bigger than a queen size into any of the rooms. So I don't know, like it would not work in this space. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what I would do. I would probably want to make the Death Star hangar with the little gantry above it.
Yeah.
From A New Hope. If I was to make an environment for it, I would probably make that. Like it's coming in or leaving. Probably coming in.
Oh man.
But, I have
just renovate a whole room for the whole diorama.
It spirals real quick in your head, out of control. You have to be very careful because then you're like, I'm doing it. And it's like, oh god. I made a studio scale land speeder, which is 1/5 scale, and that's huge. It's like 2-3 feet long. And I built one for someone, and it's great. And I have like a set of parts to make for myself, and I just never did because where am I going to stick it? And then I thought I could hang it on the wall. Yeah, like that would kind of look cool.
I was going to say, depending on how big your new shop is, you can start spending some of this stuff from the ceiling, having it fly around.
Yeah. So, I'll do that one day, I think.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh man. Well, Jason, you're always welcome back on the podcast. I mean, we've had it's such a pleasure. Yeah, we've had so many fun people over the last couple of years, and doing Star Wars, like this is a complete hobby for us to do, and like if anything, it's just kind of enabled us to just get out there and chat with other Star Wars fans and just talk about common interests and stuff like that. And we love models, and you're just, I mean, we're just really fortunate to have you on to chat about the profession.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure.
Yeah.
And if you like models in Star Wars or Star Trek, also, or anything else, honestly, Wonderfest in Louisville, Kentucky is an incredible convention for that stuff. It's really low key. If you like barbecue, like you're in heaven. If you like bourbon and barbecue, there's no finer place than Louisville, Kentucky. But this is a banner year. Yeah, this is a banner year for it because of the ILMers coming. So I'm not affiliated with the show. I help out like with the display stuff. I wrangle all the Star Wars stuff. Yeah. For the fan display or whatever. But it's just that's where I go to connect with everybody, and it's just such a cool scene.
Yeah. Oh man. No, I'm
Nice.
sorry.
Really good. Do they host that every year?
Yeah.
They host it every year.
Every year. Yeah.
Every year. Wow. Yeah, I'm sorry I can't make it. It sounds like a blast.
Yeah. Try to come one year. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, no kidding.
I don't know what they'll do for 84.
If our audience, if listeners want to check out your work and just kind of see what you're up to, is there like any social handles or URLs that they can go to see photos or anything like that?
Yeah, the easiest one is go to jasoneatonstudio.com. That's where all of my, not all of my, but a lot of my stuff. I have an Instagram, and I can't even remember what my handle is. It might be linked on my webpage.
I'll try and find it, and I'll link it all down in the description of this episode.
I'll send you a link. It might be Roboterconf. Like, I came up with a German couple of words for an email, and I'm locked into it, and I wish I had just made
committed.
I wish it had just been like poop@p.com or something really easy to remember. I have Jason at jasoneaton.com, but it just redirects. I'm locked into the Apple sphere, so
right. That's fair.
Sometimes.
It happens. All right, well, awesome. Yeah, I'll link those down below, and you have my email. I mean, we got you in the Discord now, so seriously, like, welcome back anytime. I mean, maybe we can get you on again in the future just to chat about something else, something random. Maybe it could be a Ahsoka episode review or something like that. Just we'll keep in touch, and feel free to come on anytime. So
awesome. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. We'll catch you in another one. See you, buddy.
Okay. Bye.
All right, Bryce, and that is the show that we got for this week. I think what we're gonna do is save Bad Batch. We're gonna push it to next week instead, so that we do a double special with episode 9 and 10, I guess it is. But that was super fun chatting to Jason about that.
Man, that was lovely.
Yeah.
In fact, like, what a treat to get to just, like, I don't know, talk to someone so
just enveloped in that world of miniatures and just like the trade and
so like in love with their craft. Right?
Yes, exactly.
It's like a real pleasure to get to so passionate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm looking forward to having him back on if he's got the time, and you yourself too. I guess we'll catch you in another episode.
Sounds good.
All right, buddy. All right, thank you so much to our audience for tuning in at home, and massive thank you to our co-host this week, Bryce, and our very special guest, Jason Eaton. So make sure you check out those links down in the description of this podcast episode, and take a look at his site. To check out all the non-Star Wars stuff and all the Star Wars stuff he's got going on over there, and sure we'll have more great pictures of his art in the coming months. Hoping to see those skyhoppers. Stay with us on the show. We got more Bad Batch episodes like you just heard coming in the next few weeks, leading right up to the Mandalorian season 3, which is going to be great. We'll get Kirk back on for that, hopefully, if he's got the time. And Snipped. Make sure you find us on Snip platforms. We have a little bunch of shorts that we post on the Discord, Twitter, Instagram. You can find us at those with the handle at SWScape Podcast. The Snipped little previews give you an idea as to what the episode's about. Shoot us an email, swscapepodcast@gmail.com, and we'll catch you in the next episode. of Star Wars Escape Pod. May the Force be with you.
Stress no more.